if you look at all the marketing texts, they have things like an hour after someone signs up, you should send them an email because they might have signed up and forgotten about your tool. That doesn't work with developers. They're just annoyed that you emailed them twice within the hour, like once for signing up and then a little later for, hey, do you still remember me?
Hi everyone, you're listening to Scaling DevTools, the show that investigates how DevTools go from 0 to 1. I'm joined today by Kilian Valkov, who is the founder of Polypane. And Polypane is the browser for ambitious web developers. Kilian, could you tell us a bit about what that means, ambitious web developers?
Yeah, so Polypane is a browser that I originally created to help me with essentially just responsive design. Like the whole idea of the prototype was, it feels stupid to resize my browser all the time. So what if I didn't have to resize my browser all the time? But since then, it has really grown into an app that still deals with responsive design, but also with like different media queries, like developing for dark mode and light mode, for reduced motion, forced colors, etc. For accessibility testing, to make sure you have the right color contrast, the right site structure, the right meta tags, and like just general quality, like web vitals, HTML validation, stuff like that. So it really nowadays is a tool for everything related to building really good websites. And that's what ambitious web developers want to do. They always want to be or get the most out of the work they do, and Polypane really helps with that.
Yeah, and it makes so much sense when you think about it. It's like everyone building websites is using their browser all day long, and yet using a tool that's not designed with developers in mind so much, primarily designed for internet users rather than the people making the websites. So
yeah, definitely.
And you're 100% bootstrapped as well, right?
I'm 100% bootstrapped. Yes.
Yes. Amazing. So everyone go support Kilian on this journey and go get Polypane. Kilian, so today we're going to dive into onboarding, and particularly onboarding developers, because I know that's something that you have a lot of expertise in and that you've spent a lot of time thinking about. So I wondered if you could maybe introduce us to the journey that you went on in terms of learning how to onboard developers.
Yeah, absolutely. So my journey is as follows. I did everything wrong, and now it kind of works. So the neat thing about developers is that they're very aware of like when they're being marketed to, but also when what they want and what's like the app or the company wants don't align. And that makes sense because like all the companies lie to them and they know better. You know this, I know this. Whenever like you have to deal with some organization and they're like, I'm sorry, the system won't let me do that. They're like, that's not how it works. Yeah, they're like hypersensitive to the truth in a way. And that also goes back to like literally every tool out there promises developers they'll be like 10 times more productive. And that's just never true. So whenever we as developers see that, we like automatically dismiss it. So those are all things that you don't have to explain to developers. But if you're like me and you need to, for better or worse, market an app, what you're going to do is like listen to all the marketing experts and do as they say, because they're the experts. So that's what I did with my initial onboarding, specifically talking about like the email onboarding flow. And we can talk about like in-app onboarding a little later. But like if you look at all the marketing texts for how should your email onboarding flow look, they have things like an hour after someone signs up, you should send them an email because they might have signed up and forgotten about your tool. That doesn't work with developers. They're just annoyed that you emailed them twice within the hour, like once for signing up and then a little later for, hey, do you still remember me? Also things like, you have to keep emailing them throughout their trial period, which Polypane has a 2-week trial period. And, you have to keep mailing them like at least once every 2 days so they don't forget that you exist. Which again, I'm sure it works for a lot of tools, but it just ends up being very annoying if people are engaged anyway. Or if they, don't suffer from short-term memory loss, and they know what they did 2 days ago, which all makes sense if you say it out loud, but I still had to discover that on my own through many annoyed emails from many developers. But yeah, so that's just like a journey that you have to go through. And I figured, it's better to start with like the default, what most marketing experts say, like this is the type of email flow you should use. And then just essentially what happened was like cutting half of it and ending up with something decent. So that's what I've been doing. Then in terms of like the content of those emails, there's 2 types of emails I sent during the trial. One is sort of like status updates, like you're halfway through the trial, you have a few days left. And then the other is information gathering, which is where most of like the useful feedback comes from. Like, how are things going? Like after a few days, send an email. You've been using Polypane for a few days now. Can you let me know what you like, what you don't like? Really helps me out. And I get a ton of feedback on that, and that's super high value. But then also, after the trial ends and people don't convert, I sent them an email asking, like, essentially why. And that really helps as well, because it gives people like the opportunity to either explain or ask for a retrial, which happens a lot as well, because life happens. Frequently, people get a Polypane trial and then they think, I'm going to work on this project, but then it ends up they have to work on another project that they can't use Polypane for, and then before you know it, the trial's over. And this email really gives them the opportunity to say, oh, can I please, or not please, can I give it another go? And then we can make that happen, and get people engaged that way.
Yeah, these are amazing insights. And if we were to like dig in, and you kind of covered it, but what is the difference between the email that comes in that says like, I'm still here, I don't know what the suggested thing was, maybe like the emails I get a lot are like, here are 5, I'm your customer success rep, like here are 5 tips for using our tool. Like why do you think that is like different to the kind of like your the update that you send where it's like maybe there's like halfway Because it seems like there is a big difference, but what do you think that is?
So one of the things I very purposely don't do is they're not like very well designed emails. They're very simple because very well designed emails, if you receive them for a trial, they feel like work. Like if you have like a very fancy email with like a header and then like there's the face of your customer rep and it's all like neatly designed, it feels like work.
Yeah.
Whereas that email shouldn't be the work. Like trying the app should be the work. So I do send like we can go through it. I'm happy to share like my secret sauce. Like one day after people sign up, I send an email titled "How to get the best out of your Polypane trial," and that does send them to like a few pages. It points them out to the getting started tutorial in the app, and then also points them to a video of me going through that tutorial. So they have like two ways. They can do it themselves or they can watch me do it. And that's just to make sure like they can find the documentation, they can they can or they know that I think the getting started tutorial is important. Then a couple of days later, I sent them an email titled "Quick Question," which is the one where it's like, you've been using it for a few days. Let me know what you like and what you don't like. And all of these, they get sent from my personal email, and replies end up in my regular inbox as well. So there's no like fancy logic or system or whatever. It's just I email you, you email me. Which trips up a lot of developers as well. Like most emails I get are like, I'm not sure you'll ever read this. And then I reply in 10 minutes and they're like, whoa. But yeah, I think that's important. Like if I'm going to email you, then you should be able to email me as well and get a person. I think that's a fair deal. So I work hard on making good on that. So then like halfway, I sent them an email with like a customer testimonial, which is, it's my most fluff email. But despite what I initially thought, like a lot of people really enjoy reading that, and they really enjoy like figuring out how other people use Polypane. So even though it feels like the least useful one, it still does very well on like open rate and click-through rate. And it really only links to that user testimonial.
Could I just ask on that testimonial?
Yeah, sure.
What is the testimonial? What is it?
So I've done a bunch of case studies with like different companies on how they use Polypane, what results they had, what they like, and then this is just one of them, and it's really like I just introduce the company, introduce the case study, and then link to it, and then tell them like if you have a similar story or if you're enjoying Polypane, we'd love to hear that as well.
Interesting. And in the testimonial, did you kind of follow that sort of practice in the same way? Like I know sometimes you read a testimonial and it feels like it's like, oh, before I discovered this product, I was like on the street, all my dreams were broken, and then I discovered the product, and now I'm living in a palace and I drive a Ferrari. It's like,
so all my case studies, I co-write with the companies, and I do try to stick to that pattern. because it's a good pattern. Like you can't say that how things are going now is the right way if you can't compare it to something else, right? So, for example, in this particular use case or a case study, this company has like a set number of tasks they do for each website each month. And they just ask their developer to do the same tasks with Chrome versus with Polypane and then time themselves. And then we talk about that. And it turns out that what takes 30 minutes in Chrome takes 6 minutes in Polypane.
Oh my God, that is amazing.
Yeah.
That's like such a good, I see why people like that. That's incredible.
Yeah. And that's like, I didn't come up with that. I wish I did, but
yeah,
like the company owner was just like, no, let's just time it. Let's try it out. And then this was the result. And now I get to tell people that this was the result.
Yeah. Like how much of the success of that do you think is that it would be like relatively easy to like disprove in a sense? Like I feel like a developer could see that and they'd be like, that would be so easy for me to go and check that I believe it, if you know what I mean. Like it's like, like you couldn't say that unless it was true, because it would be so easy for people to like go in and be like, well, clearly that's not right. It's like very visible in a sense.
Yeah, exactly. And before that, I did have like, I experimented with a bunch of taglines, and then one of them was like, improve your workflow efficiency 3 times. Because there's other case studies where things, where they compare it and it went from an hour to 20 minutes. Or like 3 weeks to 2 weeks or stuff like that. But like just that, no one believes. Yeah. Again, because all the tools tell you like, you'll be 10 times more efficient.
Yeah.
And that never happens, because that, like, even if you save time, it just fills up with other stuff because of reasons in the tooling. So I never found that a super compelling argument. But what I do really like, and what I think people respond to, is like a real company really using the tool and talking about it. And of course, like, it's a case study on my website, so they're not going to be like negative about Polypane, because that'd be really weird. But they're also not exaggerating, because developers can smell that from a mile away. So it makes no sense to like try to deceive people, because, as you say, like, they'll find out very quickly for themselves. So why bother?
Yeah, it's really interesting. Yeah,
it's still surprising to me that people do really enjoy getting that email, like, from what I see, from the click-throughs and the open rates, etc. Then 3 days before the trial ends, I sent them an email that they have 3 days left. So if they still want to check anything, make sure that they do so within those 3 days. And I also offer them, like, if you didn't have enough time to try Polypane, just let me know and we can extend your trial. Like, that's never an issue. But yeah, like, really just that. Like, I don't want to send overly long emails either, because I don't want to receive overly long emails. And it's just like a quick, we're still here. If you still have this on your to-do list, make sure to get around to it. Then I sent an email, like, if they have 24 hours left. And this is my most salesy email, because, this is where they decide whether or not to, or maybe not decide, but where they have to convert to a subscription or not. So this is where I link them to an online ROI calculator, as well as like a template letter they can send to their manager, just to make it easy for people to, ask their employer for a subscription, essentially. This is twofold. So for one, it helps people get to that next step where they need to subscribe. But it also really helps developers realize that, right, I can ask my employer for a license rather than paying for it myself, which a surprising number of developers don't realize, that like their employer is going to look at this and make a calculation. And that calculation, I think, is very favorable to Polypane, because developers are expensive. So if they enjoy using Polypane and it saves them like minutes per month, then it already is a no-brainer purchase for an employer. Whereas a developer themselves might compare it to like Spotify or Netflix, and then think, well, it's as expensive as Netflix or as expensive as Spotify. That sounds like a lot. Whereas an employer looks at it and thinks, well, it's as expensive as 10 minutes of this developer's time. So why are we having this discussion? So that email really helps. Then after the trials ended, I sent another email like, your trials ended. Here's a link to get a subscription. And that's essentially it, I think. Let me just quickly check. Yeah. And then again, like always in the emails, like if you have any questions, this is my literal email, just email me. And then the next two emails, I send 2 weeks out and 3 weeks out. Like 2 weeks out is, I noticed you didn't get a license. If there was anything missing or it wasn't the right time, can you let me know? Because it would really help me out. And then 3 weeks later, I sent an email, just like a general one-time email, like, here's what's been happening in Polypane in the past few months or weeks. Do you want to try it again with all the new features that we've added since?
Do you get much of a kind of take up on that?
I do get quite a lot of uptake on that. For one, like people are generally happy to say or to tell me why they didn't convert, or what frequently happens as well, which is a good ego boost, is that they say, I converted, but I just used my company email instead of this trial email that I used.
Nice.
And then like the other one, which is like, here's all the cool stuff we added. I get a fair amount of response on that as well, with people saying like, yeah, I'll try it again. It wasn't the right time previously, but these features sound intriguing. Let me give it a go.
That's really, really cool. That's really cool. And do you think like the changes you made from where you started, is it like an order of magnitude sort of better, or is it like kind of?
Yes. And that's mostly because of the stuff I took out. So like an onboarding flow only works up to the point where people say unsubscribe, like stop emailing me. Which I then do, of course. And so I've played around with the emails that I sent and also like when I sent them, which in general for developers, I found that you need to send less email, no brainer, but also less frequently. So, you don't need to email them every 2 days. They'll be fine. And then also the type of email I took out were like the, quote unquote, poorly performing ones. So I want one email that was like, do you want a personal demo of Polypane? Which like a lot of people recommend you do. Because, if you're in a conversation with your customer, then you can upsell them, whatever. But that's also just something that most developers really don't want. Like, no, I don't want to hear you talk about Polypane for an hour. I have work to do. Leave me alone. So I tried that for a while. I think like a handful of people scheduled a demo, and then like one or two actually showed up. So I took it out, and then that also helped with the rest of the emails because less people tuned out. And then the other one that I took out was kind of the same as the case study email, just a little earlier. And it was like this appeal to authority, like a testimonial from like a couple of well-known developers. And people also just didn't really like that, didn't really care. And it also didn't feel very good. It was like a appeal to authority type thing, which I think gets people in the door if you're a developer tool. Like, this person uses it, I'll give it a go. But then once they give it a go, they just want to, see what the tool does for them and not what the tool does for someone else. That's no longer relevant. Gets people in the door, I think. But after that, they don't really care about other people's opinion of the app. So I took that out as well, and then spread out the rest of the emails a little bit more.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think this is just really like an amazing like deep dive into how to do email onboarding. I really feel like I've learned a lot in this. If you had to kind of recap like the main points that you learned, what would you say they were?
I think the main point is if you're going to send email, like make sure that it's something that your audience can do something with. And that also means make it something that your audience doesn't have to immediately dismiss because it's like overly salesy, feels like work, comes from a no reply email address, or in other ways sounds and looks like, this is just sending. It's not trying to do or be a conversation. So I really see this onboarding as, or the onboarding emails as like a two-way street. Like you're trying to evaluate Polypane, and I'm trying to help you with that. But then you as a developer can also help me in figuring out how to improve the app, how to make it work for you. So let's try and get that going, rather than me pushing stuff onto you, and you just receiving that.
Yeah, that's really good. And Kilian, I think that's all we've got time for today. This is certainly like one of the most educational episodes I think we've ever done. It's absolutely brilliant. Really want to do more of this. Where can people learn more about Kilian and about Polypane?
Yeah, so you can find Polypane at polypane.app. There's a free trial. I'm going to email you a couple of times, but you can email me back, so it's all good. I have a personal blog at kilianvalkhoff.com where I write mostly about HTML, CSS, JavaScript stuff, and my opinions on that. Polypane is on Twitter at twitter.com/Polypane. I'm on Twitter at twitter.com/KilianValkhoff, where it's more of the same, essentially. So if that sounds interesting to you, come say hi.
Yeah. And I think everyone listening should just sign up for the trial anyway, just to see your email chains. And have you written anything about this as well, if anyone wants to reference?
No, I haven't. So the way I write blog posts is it's something that really needs to interest me, and usually that's something technical. I don't think this is like the ultimate way to do developer marketing or developer onboarding or whatever. It's just what's worked best for me so far. So I also don't feel like I can write a blog post and say like, this is the way you should do it. Because no, there's probably much better ways that I haven't discovered yet, that other people know about that I don't. So no, that's not really something I enjoy writing about. So I don't.
You enjoy talking about it on podcasts, though, right? Just to check.
Yeah. I like sharing this stuff because it is complicated, and I do spend a lot of time thinking about it. So I'm happy like to share that with other people, but I don't like the idea of like having to write like a guide for it or whatever.
Yeah, that's fair. Okay, amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining, Kilian.
Thank you for having me.
Very welcome. Very welcome. Thanks everyone for listening, and see you again soon. Bye-bye.